Happy 2016, everyone! My name is Laura, and welcome to my channel, Boundless Books. December is finally over, so today I'm going to wrap up all the books that I read this month. December was a bit of a rocky month for me. Towards the beginning of the month, a lot of the books I read were complete duds, but towards the end of this month, I did find one book that I really enjoyed, so I'm going to take you through everything that I read. The first book I read this month in December was Spinning Starlight by R.C. Lewis, and this is the second book in a series. I'm not entirely sure how many books she has planned. The first book in the series was Stitching Snow, and I really enjoyed that book. It's a retelling of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, however it's set in outer space and it's a sci-fi. This book, however, follows a lesser-known fairy tale, and that's the Irish fairy tale of the young woman who must save her brothers who have been turned into swans. Except in this story, they are actually taken over by a portal and are sort of trapped in this interdimensional portal. So while I really loved the first book in this series, I just felt this one was a little confusing and just unfocused. But I will still read the next book in the series just because I really like the idea of modern fairy tales set in outer space. That's a cool idea to me. I would still give it a 3 out of 5 stars just because I like the series and I'm still excited to see where it goes. But I don't know, ultimately it just really didn't do it for me. The next book I read this month is The Smoke-Scented Girl by Melissa McShane. And this book follows a junior magician named Yvonne who is investigating a bunch of mysterious fires that have been killing people throughout the countryside. So I really liked that there was a mystery element to this book, also magic, I'm a sucker for that. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. I would give it a 4 out of 5 stars. I don't know if there's any sequels planned, but I will definitely check them out if Melissa McShane ends up writing them. The next book I read this month is Unkilled by Jane Glatt. The book takes place in a world where everyone is divided up into guilds based on their strengths, and it follows a young woman named Cara and her mother Arabella, who are both from the Magician's Guild. And Cara, unfortunately, has not developed her magical abilities and is cast out by her very cold mother, Arabella, and basically left to fend for herself, so she's an ungilded, as the title would imply. And it sort of follows her, she tries to figure out her place in the world, and actually discovers that she does have a magical ability, just one that her guild never really expected her to have. I was really intrigued by the premise of this series. I thought it was really cool, and I particularly liked how the book switches between Cara's perspective and her mother Arabella's perspective. Arabella was actually, I think, a far more interesting character. She is a very ruthless magician who's attempting to rise up within the ranks of her community. There were a lot of moments that dragged in the middle. It sort of goes off on a tangent for a while with Cara protecting all the young orphans in the city that she ends up in, and that was interesting, but ultimately it just kind of felt like a huge tangent. So overall I would give this book probably a 2.5 out of 5 stars. I think that there's promise to the series. It picked up towards the end. They started to go into the Assassin's Guild a little bit, and I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. But yeah, I don't know, I didn't feel jazzed about this book. I don't think it was my favorite at all that I read this month. The next book I read this month is Shades of Milk and Honey by Mary Robinette Wall. This book I actually listened to on audiobook, and I thought the audiobook recording was really interesting. In the description on Amazon, they recommend this book if you're a fan of Jane Austen and magic, so that's definitely me. And you can definitely see where the author was influenced by Jane Austen. The main character's name is Jane. She has, a loud, boisterous mother. Her mother's pressuring her to go find her wealthy husband. So yeah, it definitely picks up on a lot of the tropes that are common in Jane Austen's novels. That being said, I actually thought it was a little too faithful to some of Jane Austen's novels. I almost felt like I was reading something like Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, where they just threw a dash of magic into a Jane Austen book. I really wanted it to be almost a little more original. All of the characters standing in society, in particular the women's, is based on their ability to produce illusions. So the main character, Jane, is actually a very skilled illusionist. However, she is a bit older and not entirely that attractive. So the book follows Jane's struggles to find a husband who can take care of her while still pursuing her dream of becoming an illusionist. So overall, I would give this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was definitely enjoyable to listen to on audiobook. I'm not entirely certain if I'm going to continue on with the series. I think there's another 2 or 3 books left in the series. I think I'm kind of exhausted with the premise a little bit. But yeah, this first book was really fun, and if you're a fan of Jane Austen, you should definitely consider it. The next book I read this month is Vengeance Road by Erin Bowman. So first off, can we talk about how gorgeous the cover of this book is? I think the author Erin Bowman used to be a graphic designer, which would definitely explain why this cover is so freaking gorgeous. Like, look at this thing. Beautiful. That was probably the reason why I first picked up this book, but I'm really, really glad that I did because it was very, very enjoyable. So as the title implies, it is a revenge story, and it follows a young woman who lives out in the Midwest. I think it's like the Arizona territories. In the beginning of the novel, her father is lynched by a gang called the Rose Riders. And so the story follows her quest for vengeance to find her father's killers. There's a lot of fighting. It definitely gets bloody. The author is not afraid to kind of go into the violence, but you know, given that it's an old-timey West story, I thought that was really appropriate.
Would you want to say like it's kind of like Quentin Tarantino?
No, it's not that bad. It's not that bloody.
Okay.
It's definitely not Quentin Tarantino bloody, but it was appropriate for where the novel is set. I think one of my favorite aspects of the novel is that it is written in first person, and the author uses the actual language that the character would use. So there's lots of y'alls and ain'ts and other things to kind of bring the character to life, which I really, really, really appreciated. This book reminds me a lot of the novel These Is My Words by Nancy Turner, which is another novel that's sort of written in first-person narration and uses the voice of a character. That one is also I think an Oregon Trail kind of style story. Overall, I would give Vengeance Road 4.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was really, really enjoyable, and I thought it ended well, amazingly, for a story with a lot of killing and vengeance in it. And the last book I read this month, and by far my favorite book, is Ancillary Justice by Ann Leckie. So this was a really cool sci-fi novel, and I'm a bit late to the game. I think this won the Hugo and the Nebula, and a lot of people were reading this a while back. But I finally picked it up and started reading it this month, and I loved it. The book has a very convoluted plot, however, I thought Ann Leckie did an amazing job of laying it out in a way that's not too confusing. This book opens on an icy alien planet and follows a soldier named Beck. Beck is from mysterious origins, but seemingly on a quest of some kind. As the novel continues, it flashes back to Beck's past, and we start to see a little bit more of how Beck ended up on this icy planet. And we start to get hints that Beck is perhaps not quite as human as she seems. Not giving too much away, there were a few characters in the novel who were a single consciousness spread out through many bodies. It was really interesting to see how the author handled characters being in many places, however, still having the same stream of thought. Overall, I would definitely give this book a 5 out of 5 stars. This is by far my favorite sci-fi book that I've read in a really, really long time, and definitely my favorite book that I read this month. I thought it was really innovative, very exciting. I've actually started reading the next book in the series, which is called Ancillary Sword. It's not quite as good as Ancillary Justice, however, I really like the main character and the world that Ann Leckie created, so I'm gonna stick with it and keep on reading it. There's even a 3rd book out, and I'm sure I'm gonna read that one as well. So there you have it. Those are all the books that I read in the month of December. January 2016 promises to be a really interesting month in book releases, so please be sure to subscribe to my channel. I'll be putting out more videos detailing all the books that I read in the month of January, and be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. And until next time, my name is Laura, and thanks for watching. Did that look awkward with my hands? I'm trying to get them apart. Okay. So there you have it. Those are all the books. I don't know what to do with my hands.